meets at the beach for a week or so every summer, as many as can attend. And so I always begin to stockpile things, at least a month ahead of time. So early last week, I asked my son, one of the two adorable and brilliant grandchildren, what I could bring that they would like. Because you know, little children, they think one thing is wonderful one week. The next week, they don't want anything to do with it. Something else has come along. So I was trying to be current. John said, well, John Turner's really into fairy tales now. And he would love a fairy tale book. Except he doesn't want one of those sanitized ones. So he has a Walt Disney book that's just happy stuff. Has all the bad parts taken out. And he really likes the ones with scary stuff better. He wants the whole story. Children have a way of telling you the truth. Every time I read the story of the sacrifice of Isaac, and I believe the Spirit had me read that, because y'all didn't know I was going to preach on the Old Testament reading. I almost never do. But I'm glad I could read it. Every time I read that story, I kind of wish there was a Walt Disney version of it. So that it would be enough for Abraham just to be willing to go all the way to the top of the mountain. That he didn't actually have to pack up his things and go all the way up that mountain, with poor little Isaac carrying the wood for his own sacrifice on his back. I think, how could God have demanded such a cruel thing? How could Abraham have been willing to take his own child, his only child, and go so far as to bind him up and lay him on that altar? It does not compute to my 21st century mind. But in fact, that's the story. That's what the writer of Genesis tells us. God commanded Abraham to go up on the mountain. God had always been good to Abraham. He had blessed him with wealth, land, and servants. And in his old age, he even gave him an heir, a son. And now, this same God was asking the ultimate sacrifice. The pagan gods at that time that other people worshipped demanded human sacrifice. So it was not a foreign idea in that day and age. But in our own time, it makes us feel a little bit sick down in the pit of our stomachs to think of such a thing. But Abraham went. And when his precious only son asked questions, he simply said, God will provide. They got to the top of the mountain, and Abraham methodically laid out the wood for the fire. He bound his beloved only son, and he picked up the knife. And God said, stop. Abraham had passed the test, and God provided. There was a ram caught in the undergrowth. And so Abraham sacrificed the ram to the loving God who had provided. The idea of human sacrifice seems abhorrent to us in our enlightened present time. But we make all kinds of sacrifices all the time. We know that very few things that are worth doing are accomplished without some sacrifice, some cost. When we talk about accomplishing the greatest good for the greatest number, we have to realize that there will be sacrifice. We think it's worthwhile if down the road we can see that there's been a benefit. We're usually willing to sacrifice something in the process if we think that it will lead to a secure retirement. We sacrifice to see to it that our children are educated and prepared for their futures. Our parents and grandparents lived through the Great Depression, and they probably understood sacrifice a whole lot better than we do. They learned how to do without something, for the greater benefit of the ones they loved. I can understand those sacrifices. But there are others that are more difficult to understand. There is a story that a professor who was a missionary's son and had been raised in China returned there after many years, after the Communist Revolution. He was surprised and he was favorably impressed with the changes that had taken place. A reporter said to him, "Don't you realize that Mao starved to death or murdered 3 million of his own people?" The professor said, "Well, it's not easy bringing the country into the modern world. 3 million people died in a revolution. But think how many more people now have food to eat." It seems almost a casual answer. When Congressman Walter Jones of North Carolina said to the administration in the early years of the invasion, after the invasion of Iraq, that he thought we had sacrificed enough of our American children, he was told freedom and democracy are expensive, but they're worth it. Sacrifice in battle is not an unusual concept for us. And on this eve of Independence Day, we can imagine that our ancestors would have said the same words. The justice and nobility of their cause gives meaning and power to the words our ancestors spoke. Those who fought in all of our wars, in the Revolutionary War, in the World Wars, they fought for freedom for this country, to defend this country when we came under attack. We don't think of sacrifice in battle as human sacrifice. We consider it self-sacrifice for a noble cause. One day, history will bring into relief the rightness or wrongness of our causes, and whether the causes were less than noble, and whether the cost was too high. 2,000 years ago, the Romans practiced human sacrifice all the time. In fact, in one day, the Romans sacrificed over 2,000 victims. Only they called it crucifixion. And they had a mountain where they went to sacrifice those who were considered to be troublemakers in Jerusalem. The mountain was called Calvary. And the Romans found, as we have found, as we've attempted to change the rule in the Middle East, and as Israel has found, as they've attempted to change the rule in Palestinian territories, that there are those who will sacrifice their own lives rather than live under a form of government imposed on them from the outside. No matter what we think, they consider their cause noble, and it's worth the cost. As Abraham led his only son, his gift of the mountain, surely he must have questioned the cost of what he was about to do. Surely he must have questioned how a God who had been so loving, who had blessed him so richly, how could that God of blessing demand Isaac as a sacrifice? How could the sacrifice of his only son, the promised son, be worth it? Is God worthy of such a sacrifice? As God watched his only son, Jesus, being led up the mountain, his cross of wood on his back, surely there must have been agonizing thoughts. Is my promise worth all this cost? Did God regret his promise made in the beginning that he would have a people who would bless all the people of the world? God, the God who had said, I will provide to Abraham, watched as the sound of hammer on nails stopped. As the wood of the cross was hoisted into place, His son looked up and said, "Why?" And no one said why. And no one stopped the sacrifice. And he breathed his last and he died. And God passed the test. God went to the depths for us. We dare not leave out the hard parts of the story. I asked God how much he loved me, and he stretched out his arms and died. God's promised to love us and to make something out of us and to bring us back to himself, no matter how much it cost. God kept that promise even to death. One day on Calvary, God did what God never asked anybody else to do, not even his first servant, Abraham. God once again provided the sacrifice. It was his only son, not a ram, but the lamb. And so God showed us to what lengths he could go to make things right between us. The Lamb, the Son, is the sacrifice of God's own self out of God's promise to love us, no matter what. I can think of no better way to lead you than to repeat what I learned as a child, probably the first verse any of us ever learned. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten